Okay, thank you guys. So today what we want to talk about, so we'll talk about system design and feel free to ask questions if you need any clarifications. So let me go through what are the basics of system design, right? So if you want to solve a system design problem, so a couple of things you need to really understand, like what's really important, right? So what are the things they are looking for, right? So think about like system design problem. So I will give you the basic things first, and then actually we need to go into the tactics, right? So it's a interactive process, right? So what I mean by interactive process, that any system design problem you are solving, it will not be something like coding problem solving. In the coding problem solving, what they are basically looking for in the interview, can you find the solution, right? But think about system design questions. It's interactive, mean you will talk to the interviewer, right? So you will talk to the interviewer, figure out what needs to be done, and you will focus on solving that problem based on the feedback you get. So interactive process mean other things that actually basically you will, as an interviewee, you will actually run the session. So just keep that in mind. So although some of the problem, the typical system design problem, it comes to something like, okay, design a Twitter feed system, or maybe design a like a YouTube like recommendation system, right? Or maybe like Facebook feed, news feed, right? Or Twitter feed, right? So most of the time, that's the only thing you will get from the interviewer, which is a little bit crazy, right? Because they will ask you these questions, and then they will not talk about anything else. So what do I mean by interactive session? Basically, what I mean by that, that you need to ask clarifying questions to figure out what is the final goal of this system design. So if you miss that part, you will not be able to figure out, or you will not get actually higher decision or actually higher signal from the interviewer. So that's really important. So keep that in mind. Every system design, you are the person who is runs the session, not like the interviewer. Obviously, like ask a lot of clarifying questions. So that's really like a key point when you're trying to solve this problem, or actually do this system design. And actually your goal, think about like this way, that a system design problem, although it's like 45 minutes to 60 minutes, if I ask you just frankly, if I give you a backend system to design, any backend system, how long do you think actually it will take to design that system? Maybe it's simple, like you are building a backend system for providing maybe student registration in a university or a school, right? So what do you guys think? How long does it take typically to design a backend system for that? Not the coding part, just the design part.
I'd say somewhere about 20 to 30 minutes.
Are you sure? Think about like in your last job when you actually design a system.
Oh, that
So
took months.
when you gather, so when you know that actually you need to talk to the clients and get that system ironed out, the design before even. So there are two steps, right? So one step is actually when your manager or actually someone says that actually you need to work on this system. It's a brand new system, right? And
Mhm.
then finally you start working on the coding. How long that timeline typically in real life?
It takes a few weeks.
It takes a few weeks.
Yeah.
So think about it. What you are trying to do, you are trying to design a system which typically takes 2 to 3 weeks. That's common. That's common for any companies. It's not like actually you are building something. And if you are building large scale distributed system or like billions of processes, that might take few months to few years sometimes. So what is the main goal? Asking clarifying questions in that case. But how much time do you have? You have maximum 45 minutes. So what do you do? How can you compress that 2 to 3 weeks worth of work in 45 minutes? Any idea?
By taking a simple case out of it,
By taking?
like a simple scenarios, uh, uh, simplified to a
Okay.
very bare
Yep. So
minimum.
simplifying it, right? So basically, I would say like scope out, right? So scope out like all the things can be done in 45 minutes. right? So you have a like, and how do you define, right? So because if you want to build a normal backend system, if it takes 2 to 3 weeks, you want to design the whole system in 45 minutes. The only way you can accomplish this task, if you can scope out all these things, figure out what are the things you don't want to build, right? And how do you do that? You are by asking a lot of clarifying questions. What you do actually, the main reason of asking these clarifying questions, that actually how can I scope it down all the backend system or whatever system you are building to actually from 2 to 3 weeks to 45 minutes. That means in 45 minutes. So really interesting process that actually in the system design, time management is more important than any other interview. Make sense? Because in the coding or actually behavioral or leadership questions, right? So typically, and the problem is that the coding, typically they have 1 to 2 questions they ask, right? The behavioral, typically they ask like 4 to 5 questions, right? Behavioral leadership, right? Even if you get 80% right, you will get a higher decision. But for system design, it's really hard if you actually get it like 80% right. Because 80% right means you have a like solid understanding what you want to build. So that's really important, right? So you actually need to scope out all the things need to be done, right? But keep in mind when you are doing it, you need to keep another things in mind, that you need to show them you know all the process of system design. So it doesn't mean actually you cut corners. You actually don't ask clarifying questions. You don't actually gather requirements, right? So now, as soon as your goal is like scope out what do you want, what you need to do. You need to, when you are doing the second step, asking a lot of clarifying questions. First thing is actually that like scope out like the smallest version you want to build, right? So there you would do, some people will call the envelope analysis, right? So how do you actually figure out what are the requirements, right? So requirements are based on technical complexities. And this is really important, right? Because maybe you will ask these questions, right? That actually, oh, how many users are there? And always ask these questions. I always say that actually ask actually number of users. Because when you ask number of users, it actually boils it down to very like specific things you need to care about, right? So maybe anything like also talk about like latency requirement, right? Latency, bandwidth. So asking these questions will help you figure out what you need to do. So that's sometimes called envelope analysis, the back of the envelope, right? You can do it in on your head, right? So it doesn't need to be like perfect. It doesn't need to be like so, but you need to have some sort of idea, right? What does it mean actually million users or billion users, right? So is it actually, are you building like your Twitter feed for millions users or actually billions of users? Because if you are building something like YouTube or actually even like Facebook feed, which has like active users is in the billions, right? So then it's really hard to do. Millions is much more easier nowadays, right? So asking these questions will help you actually to figure out what are the problems you are doing. Then, as I mentioned, right, when you do this one, then actually you collect all the functional and non-functional requirements. And you will write it down. You actually want to write it down, because what you trying to do that after writing it down in this, but I'm not writing it down, right? So I'm not actually going through the whole process, but you will do that, right? So let me go about write it down that, oh, how many users are there? What is the latency requirement? What is the bandwidth requirements? Because I remember when I was interviewed at like Facebook, like 2014, so they were hiring for Android engineer. I didn't get the job, but at that time they were asking actually build a news feed, like Facebook feed at that time. But I was asking these questions, and then they have like very specific requirement about the bandwidth, right? So you want to load that fast news feed very fast. You don't need to actually update all the feed at a time, but you can actually reload it later. For even all the picture, right? So typically, if you go to Facebook, they used to load all the pictures, right? But do you think actually do they load the whole picture, or actually high scale, high resolution picture? They create a thumbnail actually, multiple versions. At first, they load the like very low resolution picture. You guys might not know it, right? But what they do actually, because it depends on the bandwidth, right? So most of the people are using Facebook at that time in the phone, and they might not have like good, strong internet connections, right? So they were using based on cellular data. If it's a cellular data, there is a limitation, right? So if you don't ask these questions, you might not even know what problem you are solving. So asking these questions really helps. Think about like if your bandwidth requirements is like, are you watching like a game? Are you, there's a soccer World Cup going on? Are you actually building something for soccer game, live streaming, or actually are you building something which is like patient portal data or some sensitive data about the bank, or maybe trading something, right? So any trading software, because based on the bandwidth, it will actually change a lot. Because if you are in Wi-Fi, if you have a like wired connections, you have like very large bandwidth, right? But if you go to like only depend on cellular connections, then you need to like think how to actually scope it out. Asking this question will give you a lot of like idea what you want to do. And finally, when you are like, if you write it down in the like in your design doc, however I'm writing it down, basically you have a like analysis about something in a box here, something like a functional requirement, something like here, right? And then finally like agree on what to build next 30 minutes. Any question about this one? So this is your first task. First 5 to 10 minutes, you are doing this, only this. And don't spend more than 10 minutes because actually you'll run out of time at the end. So I would say like 10 to 15 minutes, this is the task you need to do. And now you understand like why time management is really important, right? Because all, if you actually spend more than 15 minutes here, you will not be able to solve the whole problem, what they are looking for. So 10 to 15 minutes max. I would suggest like try to do it like faster, right? So try to, how can you actually do it in 10 minutes, all these steps. And if you do multiple times, if you do practice it, you will gather idea of what are the question I need to ask, what are the things I need to write it down in the board, right? Because something writing, if you type slowly, it is really hard, right? So don't care about like misspelling, or if you want to like shorten it, do it like latency, you don't need to write the whole word, right? So functional requirement, you don't need to write like F, you can write like FUNC requirements, right? Or non-functional, you can just like non-f, right? So think about like these are the smart choices the good software engineer make in the system design interview. And if you don't know it, you will actually spend more time just to do this part. Like some people actually spend like 30 minutes just to do these things, right? But you have only 10 minutes, and it comes with the practice. Any questions onto this part, or is clear that actually what you need to do?
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the last part, in the last point here, agree on what to build in the next 30 minutes. Is this where I should focus more on explaining the high level design or dive?
No, so it not even like high level design. So
Mhm.
you might think that actually, so there might be, if you are just building a backend system, in backend system we'll have multiple things, right? You will
Right.
have actually build the CRUD API most likely, right? REST API or like a CRUD API endpoint, right?
Hmm.
Those one thing. Second thing, actually there needs to be a database, right? So backend needs to connect to the database. It will surface like all these like deployment, like API server, load balancer, all this kind of thing. Just like agree on the things what you want to build, right? So not like you are going on the high level design yet. You don't. So what I'm trying to say, in these first 10 minutes, when you are done with this part, the first part, you didn't draw anything on the board yet.
Okay.
Because drawing is like, I would say like really time consuming. Like anything you want to draw, it's time consuming.
Hmm.
And then you will, if they don't care, why do you want to spend time working on that one, drawing the whole like front end, back end, all those connections, all those things. So basically first 10 minutes you want to figure out what you want to build. Oh, they might say that, oh, I want you to focus on only the back end design part, right? And agree on that one, because it's really interesting. Sometimes you will see that these things is totally different than what interviewer expects and what interviewee expect. Typically what do you do? If I am good at database, most likely I want to focus on the database part, right? If I am like good at front end, even it's a system design question, I want to focus on the front end part. But it doesn't matter, because actually interviewer is looking for very specific signal about your some technical abilities. And if you can't clearly communicate that signal, you will get a no hire. Make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Vaibhav, any more questions on this system design part before we get started? The design part.
No, it's
Okay,
good.
cool. So, okay, so now you have a pretty good idea what you want to build, and obviously you are not writing code. So maybe the interviewer might say that, oh, I want you to build something like maybe build the REST API endpoint layer with database, right? So maybe they said this part, right? They are not talking about like how to scale it up. They are not talking about how to measure the latency or anything like that, right? So just focus on finally, okay, they want me to actually, now you can, as soon as you decide this one, now you can go ahead and start drawing all those things, right? So maybe I will draw a backend system, right? So I'll draw a backend system here. So this will be my backend, and they want a database, right? So maybe for the database, I will do something like this guy, right? Something like that, right? So, and don't spend like make it pretty, right? So it doesn't matter at the end, right? So just think about like there is a connections there, right? So you don't need to make it pretty. So because if you can't figure out what the actual result is, then it will be it doesn't matter at the end. So, but yeah, if you keep drawing it, you will become good at it. So okay, so I have a backend system. I didn't write anything here, but so maybe yeah, so I didn't write it. So, but yeah, so typically this is my backend system, right? So and this is my database, right? And I would say like if you know actually what tool they use, just use multiple times before the interview. That will help you a lot. So whatever database they are doing, so that actually you can copy paste, you know actually how to do these things. But this is like a little bit advanced, but at your level you need to know. So even for designing something, I would say like if you use Excalibur or Zoom drawing or HackerRank drawing, just to know the tools, right? So how to write this text, how to actually copy paste all these things. Because if you use mouse all the time, it will actually take your time. Okay, so now I decide that, oh, I need to build backend system with the database. Okay, they want actually build the REST API endpoints, right? So if I want to build the REST API endpoint, most likely I will have some sort of a REST API endpoint. And you might say that, oh, these are the things I do need. I want to build something like, okay, I will have some node. So I will do get, post, put, delete. These are the cloud operation, right? So replacer. So these are the things you want to build. And now, when you are designing this system, always communicate with the interviewer what you are trying to do, right? You are building a system, and when you are building this system, you always like clarify all these questions, scope it out that you are building this REST API for a maybe uh, student registration system, right? And obviously, when you ask these questions, you need to make sure that you are asking all these things, right? How many students are there, right? At most, right? So it's like 100 students, or am I building a system only for a like community college, which has like 1,000 students? Am I building a system for a university, which will be like you see a few 100,000 students, right? Any university might have. Or are you actually building something which is for the statewide, maybe whole school system, which will be used by all the high school students, all the university system under a state, right? Then it can be, sometimes it can be in the big larger state, it can be like millions you are providing, right? Or maybe you are building for online school system, right? Where they serve like close to 100 million people in the world, right? So just like asking these questions will actually define how you want to, do you need to scale it up? Do you need to actually use like one database? Do you need to actually make a multiple database? Do you actually want to do asking about, oh, if I need to support millions of students, and then most of the time, what do you think? The database will be read heavy or write heavy if it's a millions of students?
Read heavy.
Always read heavy, right? Almost like I would say like 5 to 1, something like that, because most of the students will read the data, right? because student registration system, they will write the registration, but basically what I'm trying to do, build something which will be used by all the students, right? uh, and just communicate with the interviewer that you are thinking about it will be a read heavy and thinking about like 5:1 or 3:1 or even 2:1, right? So asking this clarifying question will actually help you a lot to figure out what type of database you want to do. Do you want to do like multiple replica of databases, right? And if you have multiple replica, if you want to make it faster, obviously you can clone all these things, right? So you can have like one master database which you will write, and then maybe file the read replica, right? It will actually read all those data, right? And if you want to write, then it needs to go to the master database. Asking these clarifying questions will help you a lot. Database, yeah, need to talk about, okay, how much like database like records we are talking about. Is it a relational or non-relational, right? So most of the time think about like you will draw a relational database unless the scale needs it, because relational database is much more easier to maintain, and since it's a structure, there is not that much error checking you do. So you need to talk about these things in the interview, right? So I'm trying to build a system which supports like millions of students, and at the peak registration time, or maybe when they are doing an exam at the same time, everyone needs to read the same database. So maybe I need to think about like scalable part, or actually the relational database is fine. If it's less than only time people are accessing like 100 reads from the database, it doesn't matter which database you put. You can put it in a file, and then if the 100 people are reading from the file, that's fine as well. It doesn't need any like big database, right? If you're talking about thousands, think about the relational database, right? If you're talking about millions, then maybe non-relational database if you want to scale it up, right? Because relational database is really hard to scale. Non-relational database is much more easier to scale, right? Because non-relational database, any NoSQL, DynamoDB, you can scale it like a matter of seconds. But relational database is not that much easy, right? Because now you need to think about all the like constraint about all the tables, right? So if you want to insert a data, you need to do data validation, right? But for non-relational, it doesn't matter. You put it as a key value pair, right? So it doesn't matter. Asking this question will help you or define these things. But just make sure whatever I'm suggesting here, don't spend too much time on doing the things what interviewer don't care. If the interviewer doesn't care about the database, doesn't care about the persistent storage part, doesn't care about the read write throughput, right? Those kind of thing, you need to be a little bit of intelligent here, because when you provide this information, see actually what interviewer is like, what is his like face, right? So what he's trying to communicate. Maybe sometimes say, oh, forget about database, right? That means he doesn't care about the database. You need to focus on the things what he cares about, and it's your responsibility to figure out what he cares about. Okay.
Imran, Imran,
Hmm.
regarding that, so let's say to know whether the interviewer is interested in that part,
Mhm.
so let's say he may not be interested in DB. So should I ask him that, hey, should I list out the entities in the database
It
or
depends. So, yeah. So if he's not interested, it doesn't matter, right? So you can spend time 5 minutes to list out
no,
all
no,
the
that
entities.
I understand. If he's
But
not interested, it's clear. But how will I know he's
yeah,
interested
so
or not?
yeah, that's why like, so you go to like what I used to do, right? So when I was interviewing, so when I write these things, right? So get, post, and my database, I have a like, I was talking about this, I have a tables, right? So then maybe I will ask actually, oh, so in my database, in that case, same thing, right? So your questions, right? So I'll say that, oh, in my database, I have a student table, right? And then when I write that I have a student table, I will ask you, do you want me to write down the entity of this one?
Okay.
So, and then I'll say, oh, I have a student table, I have a user table, I have a course table. So something like whatever the entity is, right? So, but I would say don't go into detail unless he's interested about like, but maybe, and this is really important, right? So as soon as you heard that actually he's interested about like scaling it up, if somewhere in the line in the interview, they said, actually, I want to make it a scalable system. So in the interview, maybe in the beginning, they might say that, oh, I want to make it like support like hundreds of millions of users and want to make it scalable. That means most likely the interviewer is looking for NoSQL database, right? And if it's a NoSQL database, it doesn't matter about the entity, right?
Okay.
Because then if it's a NoSQL database, you will put all these things in a like a key value pair, right? So one is student ID mapped to all the values, right? So maybe student ID one. In that case, just think about like the whole problem actually represents then actually something like, okay, I have a this one and the data is here, right? So about the student ID mapped to a data. This is the value, student ID to the data. So then this data includes everything. You don't need to define the entity, define anything else, right? So in the data, it's a hash map. You put key value pair of all the data, courses, phone number, ID, what classes they are taking, what is the exam score, everything in the data format, right? Okay. So now, yeah. So maybe he doesn't care about the database. He cares about the scalable system, but he doesn't care about the database. Now that means the interviewer is looking for that actually, if even if you are building these things, how to make it scalable. If you're your CRUD endpoint, all these things, then you might say, do you want me to write down? So when I write this, like, oh, I have a get, post, put, delete method, right, in my backend. I might ask actually, do you want me to write down the like whole get this like what are the data they need to pass, right? So do you want me to write this down, right? Because don't spend time if they are not like interested about this one. So if they say, oh, go ahead and write it down the get endpoint, right? Or maybe something like, oh, how do you delete the endpoint, right? How do you do the validity check, right? So if you are doing the get endpoint, you need to say, oh, I might have a like students ID, right? And list of students will return all the students, and then maybe post students you need to do like if you want to register a student, right? And get students, oh, maybe I need a student's ID there, right? To get filtered data for each of the students, right? So, but don't my suggestion would be that before going into detail of any of the part, since you have only 30 minutes, you want to use your 30 minutes really well. And then so just think about, is this interviewer interested about this part, or actually he's looking for something else. So if he is interested about database, as we talked about, go in the database part. If he cares about actually going into details about, yeah, sometimes I will ask actually that should I mention the entity? If that person is really database nerd, most likely he will ask you to write a database entity. He might even ask you actually, oh, what is the relationship between student table and user table, or student table and counts table? Is it a one-to-one, one-to-many, right? So how do you actually maintain referential integrity? What is the foreign key, right? So it can go multiple ways. I had lots of system design interview last few years, last like 10 years, so 15 years. Then actually each of the interview went in the totally different direction. Someone is interested about database, someone is interested about the database design schema, someone is interested about ERP, right? Someone is interested about how to write this get, post, delete method. Someone is interested about how will I make it scalable, right? So that means how I scale it up, right? So asking these questions and figuring out what the interviewer is looking for is really important, then actually just blindly go through the design. And think about, if the interviewer is not talking in 5 minutes, you need to check. That means something is wrong, because maybe interviewer is giving you time, but most likely in every 5 minutes you want to check with him, I am doing this, do I do the next, whatever you are doing next, right? So ask them actually. So yeah, if someone is asking, oh, how to make it scalable, so now the problem is might becomes like how to make it scalable, the backend system, right? In that case, you will have multiple replica, you will have how to make it like replica of like, or instances, right? So of like backend system, right? And in that case, like what are the things you need to talk about, right? So if they're talking about the scalable part, they need to talk about like maybe you might need to ask them actually, do I need to like draw the load balancer, right? So most of them it's a good idea. If it's a load balancer, then actually how you do the like all this distribution, right? So it can be round robin, it can be other algorithms, right? So because based on the timing and everything, so how do you actually balance the road, right? So is it like, is there time dependent, right? If there is a class, most likely, or if there is an exam, that time actually you might need to scale up those things, right? So during what are the things, so if they ask you to draw the load balancer, maybe in that case you will draw the load balancer, right? So okay, I have a front end which will I have a load balancer, load balancer is here, then actually you will draw all these things like pretty quickly, right? So you have instance one, backend system one. So I'll just put instance one. And then I will say, okay, so if they want you to just talk about these one, I'll just copy paste multiple times and you'll see, oh, I have a like instance one, instance two, how will actually, so your load balancer, how you define those things, right? And then maybe I'll draw pretty quickly and don't care about like all these things like um, so arrow or anything. So if you think actually they are care about those things, then you will think about the arrow or how to make it maybe design better. But most of the time this simple line will work that, oh, there's a load balancer going to the instance one, and then actually there is some sort of algorithm in a load balancer where you actually you are defining something here, right? So what is this algorithm, load balancer algorithm, how you are tracking it, right? If you want to scale it up, maybe you will need multiple instances, right? So if you go to the database, there might be multiple instances of the database, right? So this instance one will have some sort of database server as well, right? So as soon as you want to scale it up, they will say that, oh, I have a database load balancer as well, right? And that can be like read or based on write. If it's a read, then it will go to multiple instances. And then if it's write, then you might have like multiple like single read heavy database for like this one, right? So this is read heavy database copy, right? db1 copy. And everyone, if it's a read heavy, most likely you can do like all of them might have like different one of db1 db2 copy of this master database. If they need to write, that needs to go through separate process, right? So now you need something like master database, and that master database will only use for write. So asking, you see, actually I draw all these things. How many minutes I draw all these things? I'm drawing it, but I'm not good at, I did it like a long time back, but I'm drawing it like, just think about like I'm drawing it in very fast, right? So don't spend too much time to make it perfect. It's really important actually what you are trying to do. So all the node will have a connection with actually all the instances to this master database, right? So if it's a write call. And if it's a read call, most likely they will read it from like this one, the other part, right? So this guy. Okay, any question till now? So I draw it like in 2 minutes, all these things. Doesn't need to be perfect. Think about like what you are trying to communicate and look for feedback, what interviewer is pointing out. Interviewer might say that, oh, you put all the DB here, what will happen, how to actually DB1, DB2. So what is the problem you see based on the design? Can you tell me what is the problem right now? I have a copy of DB1, DB2, and DB3, right? So what is the problem you can see right now?
We have not defined how the DB1, 2, and 3 connect to the master DB, and what is the
Yep,
process of
yep,
replicating information. Yeah.
yep. So that's really important, right? So okay, so they are reading from this DB1, DB2. That's good. But what will happen? They are writing in the master DB. So these like all DB1, DB2, DB3 will have like stale data, right? You need some sort of something, how you actually synchronize those things. So you might need another service, right? So, or database synchronization, or however you want to write a script or something like that, right? Synchronous server. So which basically what it will do, it will actually read all the data and then basically and then so you basically what you do in that case, that master DB always the synchronous job or actually whatever it is actually connected to all those DB1, 2, 3 and actually synchronize all those data like maybe in a minute, right? So if it's not a stale data, when it's reading, then the synchronous job will need to have some sort of server to figure out actually what are the things you need to care about, right? And yeah, so when you talk, think about like just for the database, we can spend 30 minutes just to talk about the database. We can spend 30 minutes just to make it like load balancer. Like in the load balancer, what type of algorithm will you use? Is it round robin? Is it actually the like least recently used LRU? Is it actually most recently used? So those are so many things you can use, right? And if it's a load balancer, think about like, oh, the customer needs to be so round robin. What is the main problem with the round robin? Do you guys know? If I use the round robin, that means first request go to instance 1, second one instance 2, third one instance 3. What is the main problem in that?
By the time we've written data to database 3,
No, don't think about the database one. Think about like just passing it through the request. Forget about the database, what is happening behind the
mm,
scene. So you are a customer, you actually send a request, right? So you are a customer, you send a request to here.
Yeah, it depends on how long the request is taking, processing time of each request. Let's say instance one, instance two got a long, one request is taking too much time, and it based on the round robin, he comes again to that instance. So now that request is, waiting because instance one is
Yeah, so
processing the previous
that's
one.
good answer. But so there can be like there can be a power user, right? One of the students like he is like do the research all the time, right? Or actually doing the exam like taking multiple times. He is the best of the best student, right? So what happens actually in the power user? If the power user comes, he actually go to the instance one. Second, like lowest user is go to instance two. All the other going to like two, three, and then actually next one is going to instance one. So few of the instances for the load balancer was the problem because some of the instance will have a heavy workload. How can we resolve it? Did you guys understand the problem or no?
No, how will it get the heavy workload?
Oh, so some of the user, the request, what they are working on, some of them might be like power user. That means he's doing a lot of like workload.
It will be distributed, right? Now, let's say the power user
No,
sends
it's not,
1,000
right? So
requests.
because the typically there's a problem, right? So when it goes to the instance one, next time the user one comes, you want to give them to instance one.
Okay. Sticky sessions. Okay.
Why is that? Because yeah, sticky session, right? So you want to make sure actually he has the authentication, he has the like cookies and everything that instance, right? But yeah, you need to maintain like that session needs to be like distributed as well. You can do something like that. But yeah, typical solution is that actually yeah, the power user actually will consume all the power, right? And the other problem is that actually yeah, so some of this instance will be like overloaded. To solve this problem, how can you solve it?
Based on the CPU usage,
Yep.
some kind of a
Not the
metric.
CPU usage, that's based on the like instance usage or actually throughput, right? So
Mm-hmm.
current like CPU, memory, everything, right? Not only the CPU, right?
Mm-hmm. Some metric.
So yeah, so
Some metric.
basically before even forwarding the request, you check actually all the instances and then verify that actually which has the like least used, right? So maybe instance three is sitting idle for a long time. You forward it to there. Okay, that's one thing. Load balancer has another problem, right? So because like if you do round robin, some of the instance might go down, but you are thinking, oh, last request I went to instance two, now I'm sending it to instance three, but instance three might be down. So even before sending that, you need to do a health check, right? All the instances. That is it actually if I want to go to like instance three, is it actually available? It's not, then actually you need to remove from the pool of like load balancer. There are so many things you can talk about. But basically, even for the think about like scalable part, that I can talk about 30 minutes. And then that's user, right? So how do you load balance, right? For the user, if you want to make it load balance really well, you want to distribute the load and distribute, there is like five, six algorithms actually how to do that, right? So, and maybe how easily you can find that user needs to instance one. What is the algorithm will you use? So for example, like Amir is going to like sending a request, it needs to like instance one. How will you quickly decide?
by using something like a hashing function.
Yep. So you typically do the hash and then hash function needs to be consistent, right? So it doesn't mean actually that I mean typically goes to the instance one all the time, right? Because you don't want to like you don't want a hash function which actually gives like instance one and next time instance 100, right?
Mhm.
So using hashing function to actually that's how very quickly you can decide which instance does it need to be forwarded to. Okay, so these are the things you need to talk about. So I would say, yeah, so deep dive, and it totally depends on the interviewer, right? So, and we'll do a mock interview with Vibe as well. So, and then we'll figure out actually what are the things you are missing, what are the things you need to focus on. But yeah, these are the things. And based on the interviewer feedback, even like when I did like um, system design interview. So I asked the similar question, but three different interviewee might actually go to the three different places and still might get the offer because they decide what they want to build on, right? And sometimes this is flexibility. The interviewer is not like, as an interviewer myself, I'm not too restricted on, oh, I want to build this database in this specific way, because the main idea of like system design is brainstorming the whole session. If you can't brainstorm in real life, you talk about the trade-off, you talk about the like availability, consistency, partition, network partition, how to make it scalable, what are the users, where are the users are located, is it read heavy, write heavy, what type of database are you using, are you using some sort of like sticky session, so what type of load balance algorithm are you using. So asking these questions will actually, so even I asked like 5 6 clients, I asked the mock interview same questions, they might go into the 4 or 5 different direction, still they get a higher if they actually do all the steps correctly. So that's why it always says that system design is a ambiguous questions, and actually it's open-ended questions. It's not like there's a fixed answer. In coding, if I ask you to invert a binary tree, there's only solution if you can binary, if your code actually invert the binary tree or not, right? At the end, that's what I will decide, right? But in system design, you might go to totally different route and then still get an offer. Okay. Any last minute questions before we wrap up the system design part?
Yes, yes. So, like in this design, right, we created a synchronous service, which synchronizes the master DB to other DBs as such, right?
Mhm.
So we just wrote the name as such. So that, like this one is very simple. You only have one service. Let's say you have got, one student registration service. One is like, student admin service. So the functionality of that service, right? Should I mention it in that block? Let's say one liner, or just the admin service, registration service should be good in the
I think
diagram.
admin service, digital service is good unless that person
Okay.
is wants you to deep dive. Yeah. So as I mentioned, right? So time management is key, very key in system design. So if they don't ask, don't like provide that extra. Like don't need to show them what you know,
Yeah, just speak it
unless
out
they are
and
in
don't
really. Yeah.
write.
So if you write, yeah, registration service or admin service. Okay, I'm thinking about admin service. If you are not sure, you just ask them actually. Think about like if you can say it in 30 seconds, go ahead and state that information, right? But if it takes 2 minutes to explain, like just ask that actually, should I explain or do you want me to explain? Because you can ask these questions in 10 seconds, right? So what I'm saying, if you want to spend 3 minutes explaining some of the parts, just confirm with the interviewer first if they want that information.
Okay.
Any more questions before we wrap up the system design part? Okay, cool. So thanks for the people who are actually hearing it later.